I am writing the Becoming You book. It won't be out for a year, so this is not a sales pitch, I'll tell you that. But I'm working on it. And I was writing about our capacity for change, because Becoming You is a transformative process. You start at the beginning and you think, I'm not exactly where I want to be. What is my life meant to be? You wouldn't be doing Becoming You, the process, unless you were sort of thinking, am I doing the right thing, or what is the right thing? And so the whole methodology presumes that you're open to change. And I was writing something about this idea of change. Change is very hard. Nobody really says, oh, gee, I'm dying to change, and just leaps into it because it's going to be so much fun, right? And I was pondering this, and when I went to bed, it was like 11 o'clock, and I just finished writing, and I kept on thinking, there's a thought, there's a thought, there's a thought. What could it be? And there was a quote that just kept circling, and I couldn't grab it. And then I went to my desk the next morning, and I typed in a few of the words from that quote, and it popped. It is the last line of The Great Gatsby. And in that moment, the protagonist, and he's not a hero, he's an anti-hero, Nick Carraway, is standing on the dock after so much SHEEET has gone down in The Great Gatsby, and we've all read it in high school, so no spoiler alerts there, but a lot of bad stuff goes down with very fancy people who look very perfect from the outside, and a lot of terrible things happen. And at the end, Nick Carraway is considering all the horrible things that had happened, and he says, and so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. And, you know, like you, I wrote high school papers about this line, and you can look it up and think about it. But really, I think the general scholars agree, your English teacher agrees, and I agree, that this line is basically a meditation on how we don't change, that we try to go forward and we are pushed back, again, the waves push us back into the past, and that we keep on reliving who we were, and we cannot break out. And actually, Great Gatsby is a story about how much we want to change and how much we want things to be different. That's what Jay Gatsby was all about, was reinvention. He was a person who totally made himself up. I'm sorry if I'm jostling the cobwebs of your mind. Somehow this book really stayed with me over the many years that I think I've probably read it 5, 6 times. But the book seems to conclude we just get pushed back out of it. And so I thought, wow, I would love to teach some of the big questions of life to my business students through novels. And I put it out there into the great universe on LinkedIn. And a lot of people said, yeah, that's a really cool idea. And I would say this is not an original idea at all, because when I was at business school, at Harvard Business School, in fact, I took this exact class, and it was taught by Robert Coles. He was famous then. He's since left this universe, but he was famous then as a child psychiatrist and an author. He wrote 80 books. And he wrote The Moral Life of Children, which was one of the most unbelievably important books to date, and I think it went on to be a very important book about what is the moral life of children. If you're a parent, you've often wondered if children have a moral life or not, because they will be very naughty. And when do children develop a moral life? That's what his question was. When do they know right from wrong? Over the years, I've accumulated a lot of knowledge about business and human nature, and part of that has been by reading some really great business books, and hopefully being a part of the writing of some of those books as well, and reading business. But what is business if it's not life? And actually, some of the most important things that I've ever applied in business, or some of the most important lessons that have ever guided me correctly in my career, forget business, but in any career, have been what I've learned through literature. And so, I don't know, I really dig this idea. And actually, for this podcast, I thought about which books actually had the biggest effect on me. I just jotted them down, and the questions that they raised for me, which really have helped me in my career. So I'm just going to run through them. Okay, so I would say the first is the Iliad by Homer, which is a long poem that was written in somebody's going to have to look it up, 2000 BC, I think. I remember when I read it in high school, and then I read it in college, hating it a lot because it's really, really, really hard to understand. And I was writing about it again in Becoming You, because its lessons have stayed with me, and it's about why we fight. Why do we fight? Why must we always war with each other? Are our fights with other people always just a proxy for our fight with ourselves to discover our identity? That is heavy. And so when we are starting to have conflict with people in life, like a spouse or at work or with a roommate, what are we really fighting about? Are we fighting about who we are? That poem raises those questions And I think kind of answers them by saying it's just one long battle to figure out who you are going to be. Becoming You territory. I was totally changed by a book called Them by Francine Duplexis Gray. It was actually a memoir. It's called A Memoir of Parents. And so it's not a novel, but she writes the story of her life through her parents. And when I finished reading it, I walked downstairs. I was completely mortified. And I held it up to my kids and I said to them, please don't ever do this to me. I mean, it is a brutal depiction of her parents, who were important intellectuals in New York in the 20s and 30s. And she just destroys them. And it was the beginning of a theory that I began to have, which is just amnesty for all parents. When you're 21, what your parents did to you, what they didn't do for you, you got to let it go. Let go of the victim mentality. Some parents suck. I get it, okay? Believe me, I understand. And I've been a parent. And at a certain point, how much more time can we spend blaming them? They screwed up, sometimes intentionally and sometimes not. But if you define yourself by what your parents did to you, you're taking a lot of energy that you could be putting on defining who you are and redefining and changing the narrative of your life. And that book, I really respect her as a writer. She's, again, another person who's no longer with us. But I was stunned by how much she still had bitterness. And I thought, wow, what if we could transform that emotion into something more positive? Now, she was a great writer, and so maybe that's what she transformed it into. But it made me really think about what we hold our parents responsible, but more importantly, when we stop holding them responsible for this. Now, Jorge, our producer here, is about to become a parent, and this is going to have new relevance for you, Jorge, shortly, when your child starts blaming you for everything at around age 7. Okay, another book really, really, really powerful, think about it all the time, is Peace Like a River, famous book by Leif Enger. And this is a book who asks, who do we believe created us and who do we trust? I mean, your employees will have existential questions. Your colleagues will. And if you haven't thought about these things, you're just sort of, you don't want to be basic. Okay, that's actually sort of the beauty of bringing literature and poetry and music into your life. I mean, my class, DMS, has tons of music in it. Becoming You has poems in it. And this is me, I think, subliminally making this lesson to my students, if I could be so bold as to say that they should open their aperture to not just read business, but also read novels. All right, I think that's it for my rant today, just about novels and poetry and movies and music and putting it all into the big pot that is your brain for life, and figuring out who you are. And not just sticking with one kind of stream of messaging coming at you, but taking it all in. And then also the final part of it, me sort of saying, as we read these books and listen to music, we are thinking about and forming and testing out our values. And that is the work of our life, especially if we're trying to figure out what to do with our life. We have to know what our values, along with our aptitudes and what interests us. That's all part of the Becoming You methodology. And so I'm all about you digging up into all that stuff and figuring it out. Okay, that is my rant and rave so far.